we have Craig Jimenez, our Community Development Director, John Mayer, our Senior Planner, and we are very happy to have this meeting this evening. Thank you very much for your attendance. The purpose of this meeting is really to kick off the environmental review phase, which is a pretty lengthy process for the Oak Park specific plan project. Goldrich Kest is the property owner of an existing residential development at 125 West Olive Avenue, and they're proposing to develop a brand new residential project at their location with approximately 269 units. It also will include deed restricted affordable units and senior units. Here present tonight and who will be going over the presentation is the environmental consultant on the project. The company is Meridian. Tony Licacciato and Michael Levi are here. And then we also have Madison Baker. She's online and she's representing the property owner. So with that, I think I'll turn this over to the property owner to kind of just give an overview of the purpose of the project, and then we'll have the environmental consultant present the project, go over the purpose of this meeting. And I think overall, it's just really important to note that this is just a very early step in the process. All project comments will be considered and folded into a larger document, which will later then go through another public review and eventually public hearing process. So Madison, if you'd like to take it over from here.
Awesome. Thanks, Sherry. And thanks, everyone. Again, like Sherry said, thanks for taking the time to be here. My name is Madison Baker. I'm the development manager representing Goldrich Kest on this Oak Park proposed development. Sherry mentioned we're the current property owner and have owned this property since 1978. And we also own another property in Monrovia, a little further west, Monrovia Gardens. So we've really been in this community for a long time, and we are really excited about this project. We are excited to address some current issues that we have that are kind of inherent of the 1970s construction technique that we're dealing with now on an operations basis. So we're really excited to provide an improved facility for our residents and also create more housing in the process. And Sherry also touched on this about we have 54 senior units, which will be maintained at the property. And we'll also be adding additional covenanted affordable housing. So we're really excited to create a mixed age and a mixed income community in Monrovia. Another issue we are excited to address with this development is our parking ratio. Currently at the property, we do not have as many parking stalls as we have units, and that parking ratio will be considerably addressed in this new proposal. So we're really excited to improve that for both our residents and the surrounding neighborhood. And as you'll see in this presentation, and we'll get onto it as we continue to engage the community as the process goes on, we are really excited about the design. We've worked closely with our architect, KFA, who have thought considerably about the context of Monrovia and how to integrate materials that respond to Old Town and stepping back on certain street edges. So you'll see that tonight, but also as we continue to engage the community through the rest of the entitlement process. And then lastly, I just want to finish up with, our company, Goldrich Kest, we're long-term owners. We're going to continue to own and operate this property for the foreseeable future. And so we're really invested in creating the right project for this location and a project that lasts well and works well within the community. We're early on in the process, but we're excited to get started with this environmental review.
Great, thank you, Madison. As Sherry mentioned, I'm Tony Licacciato. I'm a principal of Meridian Consultants. So we're the city's consultants. Our role is to do the technical work and assist the city with complying with the environmental review requirements under our state law, the California Environmental Quality Act. So what we're going to do this evening, We're going to give you an overview of the proposed project, describe that to you. We're also going to give you a description of the environmental review process the city will be conducting for this. We'll walk through the steps and the timeframes, and then we'll get to the important part of the meeting this evening. The city wants to provide an opportunity for comment. We want to hear from you on what you feel the potential effects of this project on the physical environment might be. If you have any thoughts on how these effects could be lessened or avoided, and any alternatives you may think of to this project you'd want the city to study in the CIR. And then we'll go over the next steps and the additional opportunities for public input, because as Sherry said, this is just the beginning of the city's review process for this project. You all know where Monrovia is here, north of the 210 freeway. The existing Oak Park project is located west of Myrtle, with Colorado Boulevard on the north, Olive Avenue on the south, Primrose Avenue on the west, and then Falling Leaf Alley on the east. The city is required to conduct environmental review of any project if there are discretionary actions proposed. So those are actions that require approval. For this project, there's a set of them. First off, a general plan amendment, which would change the land use designation in the city's general plan from the current designation of residential high density. So it's already residential high density, and we have the existing apartment complex. It would be changed to plan development to allow the project that's proposed. Plan development allows flexible development standards for the property. There'll be a zoning code map amendment. So zoning implements the general plan. Right now, there's a residential high zoning designation on the site, which matches the residential high density general plan designate. That would be changed to Oak Park specific plan. Our state law allows cities to adopt the specific plan as an alternative to standard zoning. So this is a document that will have individual development standards and guidelines that will regulate the development of the new project as proposed on this project site. That's the specific plan itself. Again, will define development standards, including such things as the allowed density, floor area ratio, unit size, parking. The other entitlements, we do have a state law, the density bonus law passed by a state legislature to get more housing in our state. That's in California Government Code sections 65915 through 918. So projects are allowed to vary from the general plan and zoning standards based on the percentage of very low income and low income units being provided. This project includes both, and that allows for some variation from existing development standards. There'll be a parcel map. There's 4 existing parcels now. They'll be combined into a single parcel to allow development of the new building that's proposed. Then last, under the city's current code, a conditional use permit is required for any multifamily project that has more than 2 units. Now, the city is currently updating their code, and by the time this project makes it before Planning Commission and City Council, the CUP may no longer be required for developing a multifamily project of more than 2 units, but that'll be based on the city's process for updating their ordinance and regulations right now. So as I mentioned, the existing Oak Park property is located in 150 West Colorado and 125 West Olive Street. It's 2.7 acres now, contains the 2 3-story apartment buildings, the 2 parking structures on the east along Falling Leaf Alley. Right now, these 2 buildings contain 156 1- and 2-bedroom units. Of those units, as Madison mentioned, 54 of those units are currently restricted by a recorded covenant that they can only be leased to senior households. So 54 of the existing 156 1- and 2-bedroom units have to be leased to senior households right now. And right now, for those 156 units, there's 145 parking places provided on the site. Overview of the project before we show you the plans, the elevations, and renderings of the project. the project as a whole would include the proposed demolition of the two buildings, parking structures, all the site improvements that are currently on the Oak Park property. What's proposed is a new 6-story building that would contain 269 units. So that's an increase of 113 units from the 156 units that are in those two buildings now. So we go from 156 units to 269 units. Right now, there's 1 and 2 bedroom units. What's proposed are 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units, including 54 1-bedroom units, 54 1-bedroom senior units that would replace the 54 existing senior units, 135 2-bedroom units, and also 29 3-bedroom units, which currently aren't in the 2 buildings on the site. The existing senior units will be replaced, as mentioned. Also, we have another state law that now requires the city to determine if any of the existing units are being rented to any households that qualify as low income. If so, those units also have to be replaced. So the city's done a study to make that determination, and those units will also be replaced. Since this is two existing buildings with existing residents, there will be a relocation plan as part of the project where the owner will be working with each existing resident to help find a new unit to live in while they're developing this new project. There'll be 421 parking spaces provided. So right now there's 145 spaces for the existing Oak Park units. That'll go up to 421. So that's 276 more spaces for the 113 additional units, and that'll provide additional parking. That parking will be provided in 2 levels. We'll show you one on the ground level, and there'll also be 1 subterranean level of parking. So 2 levels of parking holding those 421 spaces. There'll also be lots of spaces for bikes under the city's new standards. 166 long-term, 28 short-term parking spaces for bicycles. There's new landscaping planned along each of the street frontages, Colorado, Primrose, and Olive. And as part of that, there's going to be public park space of close to 5,500 feet, I'll show you, on Primrose Avenue, close to the center of the project, near the main entry. This is the first floor of the proposed project. What you can see are units along Colorado on the top, along Primrose, and along Olive. Then you can see those units on the ground level wrap around the proposed parking. The entry for that will be off Fallen Leaf Alley that you can see on your right. Then there's also a second driveway off Olive that will go down to that subterranean level of parking that will be under this level. Then over on Primrose, you can see the proposed public parklet. Again, about 5,500 square feet with landscaping benches. That's near the bus stop that exists on Primrose and will remain on Primrose. That's at the ground level, and there's some steps going up. The blue spaces shown on either side are the lobbies into the proposed residential building, and then the management leasing office for the owners would be on this level. And again, at the corner of Primrose and Olive, there's an existing dental office that remains with their parking area, so this project wraps around that. This is the second level. As you come up the stairs and into it, there's all the apartments are wrapped around a central courtyard that will contain amenities for the residents. There's a pool. There are some community meeting rooms. And then the second, third, fourth, fifth floors are similar, as is the 6th floor. Here's some renderings to show you how the project would look. Off Olive and Primrose here, here's that existing dental office, the new proposed building. Please note the 5th and 6th stories step back. So those step back to kind of reduce the mass of the building as you see it. So as you're walking along these streets, you won't really have a view of the upper levels of the building. Over on the right top, this is a rendering of Primrose. This shows that public parklet area, about 5,500 square feet, which is just south of the existing bus stop that'll remain, shows the residential lobbies. on both sides, and then behind it, the stairs that go up to the second level with the courtyard area containing the resident amenities. And here's a view from Colorado and Primrose. These are the conceptual elevations, north along Colorado and east along Falling Leaf Alley. The proposed materials include a cement plaster in white, beige, and dark gray. There's some brick at the bottom to kind of anchor the building to the street and the lower level. And then there's some wood accents throughout the elevations. And then the balconies have some metal railings, and there's also some metal mesh in certain locations as an accent. Here's the south elevation that'll be along Olive, and here's that garage entrance that will go to the subterranean parking level. And here's the west elevation, which is along Primrose. You can see the stairs here. That would be the two residential lobbies that'll be right behind that public park area. And again, you can note the way the upper two levels, fifth level and the sixth levels, step back. And there's a change in materials and colors to kind of, again, reduce the overall mass of the building as you would see it from the surrounding streets. Now, as I mentioned, the city's required to conduct environmental review under the California Environmental Quality Act. Our state law has some objectives for environmental review. First off, EIRs are prepared to provide information to the city's planning commission and city council on the potential effects of this project on the physical environment. So CEQA, our state law, is focused on what are the physical changes to the environment and what are the potential physical impacts of those changes. The purpose of the EIR is to identify ways that any impacts or effects that are identified as significant, how can they be avoided or lessened? Then another purpose of the process is to promote coordination between governmental agencies, which didn't always happen before our state law required it. So as I go through the steps in the process, this is one of the reasons why the city is required to send out notices, release a draft EIR, provide that to other public agencies to allow for consultation and exchange of information. And then our state law is also oriented to increase the public's understanding of this review process and the participation and involvement of the public in this review process. Here's an overview of the process, and I just want to walk through the steps and some of the timeframes. Right at the top, what happens when the city receives an application for a new project? They start a preliminary review process. And as part of that preliminary review process, they collect information, review it, and make a determination on what level of environmental review is required. For this project, a determination was made that an environmental impact report or an EIR needs to be prepared to study the potential effects of the project and determine their significance. The second step is where we are right now. The city has started a scoping process. First, that included the preparation and release of a notice called a notice of preparation. You can see this notice on the city's website. If you go to the planning department development spotlight page and you look for the Oak Park project, that notice of preparation is on there. That notice was sent out to other public agencies, local, regional, and state level, to allow them to provide comments to the city. Also, as part of the scoping process, the city's holding this meeting this evening to allow an opportunity for comments. This notice of preparation has a 30-day review period. At the end of that 30-day review, city staff will be sitting down with all the comments they've received, including the ones they hear this evening, and they'll make a final determination on what needs to be studied in the environmental impact report. Then we'll move down to the third step. They'll have us go away and get to work, and we'll prepare the draft environmental impact report. That'll be reviewed by city staff. Again, we're technical consultants here to assist the city with conducting this environmental review. After the draft EIR is prepared, it's released for a 45-day public review period. Again, it'll be distributed by the city to local, regional, and state agencies for review and comment. It will be available for you to review on the city's website. At the end of that 45-day review period, the final EIR will be prepared. That'll include a written response to every comment received on the draft EIR. If any revisions or corrections are needed, the information that was presented in the draft EIR, that'll be included in the final EIR also. After that final EIR is prepared, and only at that point will the project then move forward for public hearings. State law requires first that the city certify the EIR. And this certification states that it was prepared in accordance with state law and all the steps were followed, and that it represents the city's independent and objective opinions about the potential effects of this project on the environment. So that happens first, and then Planning Commission and City Council will hold public hearings on the project. So what I wanted to notice, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 steps here, this flow chart. The second step here, scoping process, where we are now, the draft EIR review period and the public hearing are all steps in this process where public input and comments allowed. So this is only your first opportunity to comment on this project. You can also review the draft EIR and provide comments at the public hearings the Planning Commission and the City Council will be having. When the draft environmental impact report's available for you to review, it'll contain a complete description of the project, a description of the existing physical environmental conditions on and around the Oak Park project site. It'll include an analysis of the potential environmental impacts of the project. If any are identified as significant, there'll be measures to avoid or lessen those impacts. Under our state law, those are called mitigation measures. And there'll also be an executive summary at the front, so you can get the overview before you dive into hundreds of pages of technical information and analysis. Now, the main purpose of the meeting this evening is for the city to allow for an opportunity to comment on the potential environmental effects of this project. We skipped over it. Okay, here, draft EIR. Next, I just wanted to go over the scope of study. As I mentioned, during preliminary review, the city actually prepared an initial study. Again, if you go to the development spotlight page, this 60+ page initial study document is there. It contains preliminary review of the project. Based on that preliminary review, the city's identified the topics on this slide for review. This is 16 of the 20 topics identified under state law for potential study. I also want to mention that under state law, the city will study the potential impacts of construction of this project. So we'll be analyzing temporary construction impacts, the impacts of the project after it's built. And also for each topic, we'll be looking at cumulative impacts. That's a term identified in state law that means what would be the potential combined effects of this project with other projects that are proposed in the city at this time. Some of you may have attended the scoping meeting the city held last week for a project right across the street that's proposed. So we'll be looking at the combined effects of those two projects along with all other projects proposed in the city at that time. The topics that will be studied or proposed for study include aesthetics. That'll be changes in the visual characteristics of this site, the potential effect of having this 6-story building on the site, unavailable views of the hills and mountains that form the backdrop of the city. The EIR will study potential air quality impacts of the project, including temporary impacts from constructing it and the long-term impacts from occupancy and operation. There is an existing oak tree on the site, and the city has an oak tree ordinance that is in effect, so we'll be looking at the potential effects of removing that tree and the other landscaping in a biological resources section. Cultural resources section will consider archaeological resources, paleontological resources, and historic resources. As I mentioned, there will be one level of subterranean parking, so that means there will be some excavation that could disturb soil that hasn't already been disturbed with construction of the existing building. There'll be an energy section that'll look at the compliance of this project with applicable energy standards. Greenhouse gas emissions, we'll look at the change in the amount of greenhouse gases that will be generated by the uses proposed on the site. Geology and soils, again, with that new level of subterranean parking, being proposed, and a 6-story building where there's 3-story building now. There'll be analysis of the suitability of the geological formations and the soils on the site to support those structures and development. The project will change the drainage characteristics of the site. So that will be looked at. How will the hydrology and drainage characteristics change? And how will the project comply with existing water quality standards for surface runoff? There'll be a land use and planning section. As I mentioned, there'll be a specific plans proposed as part of the project. Any specific plan by state law has to be consistent with the general plan. So we'll be analyzing the consistency of the proposed specific plan with the city's general plan in that section. And also the consistency of the project with applicable regional plans and policies. The noise section will include analysis of short-term impacts from constructing this project and long-term impacts from change in intensity of residential development, changes in the location of where autos and vehicles are entering and exiting, and the effects on all the surrounding uses. As the number of units will be changing on this project, and that'll affect the city's population and the city's housing stock, there'll be a section that will analyze the consistency of those changes with the city's general plan, including their recently adopted housing element and with regional population and housing projections. When you have an increase in residential density, that can also lead to an increase in demand for public services. So that will be examined. How will this affect fire, law enforcement, other public services? Will there be any new facilities required that could result in additional impacts in the environment? Same for recreation facilities. There'll be recreation facilities developed as part of the project and an increase in the number of residents that could increase the use of the city's existing park and recreation facilities. A transportation section that will look at the change in the amount of traffic that'll be generated on the site. And also under our state law, how does that increase the overall amount of travel by vehicle and the consistency of that with plans and policies we now have in place to try to reduce the overall amount of travel and its effects on greenhouse gas emissions in the state. So we'll have a complete section looking at that. State law also requires the city to consult with any local Native American tribes that may have information regarding the potential presence of tribal cultural resources on the site. Again, with that need to excavate the site for the subterranean parking level, there could be some disturbance of soil that hasn't been disturbed before. So the city's already sent out the required notifications to tribal groups in the area, and they're waiting for responses to that. And any tribes can require consultation with the city to share information, and that information and any recommendations will be incorporated into the tribal cultural resources section. Also be a utility and service system section of the EIR. Again, with the increase in density, how will that affect water conveyance, wastewater collection and treatment, and all other utility systems, power, communications, etc. Will any new facilities need to be built, and will building those facilities have any impacts? In addition to looking at these topics, again, for construction impacts, the impacts of the project, and combined effects with other projects, to also be an alternative section that will look at alternatives to the proposed project. The purpose of that section under our state environmental review law is to provide additional information to the Planning Commission and City Council to help them identify ways they could avoid and lessen any impacts that may be identified as significant. Again, that gets us to the important part of our meeting this evening, which is where the city would like to open it up for comments. And again, what we're interested in hearing this evening is, you have any comments on what you feel the potential effects of this project could be that you recommend the city study in the EIR? If there are any project features or ideas you have about ways to lessen effects of this project, if you have any thoughts about potential alternatives to this project. Do want to mention that as I went through the process, the city, as Sherry said, we're at the beginning of this process. We're trying to determine what the study in the EIR will be. So at this point, technical analysis hasn't been completed, And for that reason, we probably won't be able to answer specific questions you have tonight on the potential effects of the project, but we want to hear what you would like studied in the EIR, and we'll make sure that we include analysis and provide that information in the draft EIR for your review and comment. You can, whoops, get back to our last slide. Before we open it up for your questions and comments, again, that 30-day notice of preparation review period started in the middle of December, and it's going to close on Tuesday, January 16th. So city would appreciate if you'd like to submit written comments, if you could submit them by next Tuesday. You can send your comments to Sherry at the Community Development Department at 415 South Ivy Avenue, Monrovia, 91016. You can also email them to planning@ci.monrovia.ca.us. And you can call the planning department and contact Sherry if you have any questions about how you can submit your comments. And we hope that information was helpful. And with that, we will open it up for comments. Michael, will you be able to recognize people as they?
Yeah, if you could use the raise hand feature, and then Tony or I can call out on who's next to speak.
Some people are taking advantage of the chat feature. Thank you. We'll take those comments and the city will consider those. If you'd like to enter comments in the chat feature, that'd be just great. And again, as Michael said, if you'd like to speak, just raise your hand and we'll unmute you and let you provide comments. Looks like we have one, Michael.
Looks like, Michael, you need to unmute yourself. It's not giving us permission to unmute you.
Okay, am I there?
You are.
Okay, I'm Michael Scharf. I live on 239 North Ivy. Been in the city for like 27 years. I noticed that you had a couple of renderings from, I think, Olive and also maybe on Colorado. The one that I would be interested in is, say, on the east side of Myrtle, looking, are we going to see this 6-story building looming over the back of the west side, or how much of that are we going to actually see? That's one of my concerns. And then another concern was, which you mentioned you're going to look at, is the traffic, which when the 701 Myrtle goes in, I believe their parking lot is on Olive and you guys are going to be on Olive, and pretty much we have one lane in each direction on both Primrose and Myrtle, and I'm sure it's going to affect Ivy also, just with the increased traffic. And then was there any thought of native plants? I know the 701 was looking at native plants. I don't know if this one is going to be trying to do that, and I'll go ahead and write all this stuff down and send it in, but just wanted to bring that up.
Thank you. I do want to mention there was only a couple renderings in our presentation this evening, but there are and will be additional views provided in the EIR. Draft EIR you'll see, along with additional information on the relationship of the proposed building to all the surrounding uses. So hopefully that when you see the draft EIR, you'll be able to understand the relationship to Myrtle. And yes, as far as traffic goes, access and circulation, where the new driveways are proposed for this new building, how they line up with the existing driveways are on it, and the new driveways proposed for the 701 South Myrtle building. Again, that's looking at the potential cumulative effects, changes of this and another proposed project that will be specifically analyzed and presented in the draft EIR. And I didn't take the time this evening to run through the landscape plan, but we'll have the landscape plan in the project description section of the EIR with a full description. And yes, it's also heavily based on native drought tolerant plants, along with, for the understory, and then there's new street trees proposed on all 3 sides.
All right. Thank you
So
very
we'll
much.
provide additional detail on that.
Okay.
Well, sure, I may have been wrong. I thought the start of the meeting was the part where we all awkwardly stare at each other, but until we have someone else that wants to provide comments, here we go. Edward, Michael, if you can.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you. We can.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. I appreciate it. Just curious if we have a good idea. I mean, it sounds like the analysis was done on the current rents that are charged there. Do we have an expectation of what the rents would be moving forward? And I know there's a kind of thresholds for those lower tiered affordable units, but what are those thresholds and for the new units once they're completed?
Oops.
And Tony, I can go ahead and address.
Thank you,
that.
Craig.
Sure. Right now for very low income units, the rent for a 1-bedroom is running about $890. Sorry, $980, and for a 2-bedroom, it's roughly about $1,250. That number is adjusted every year, and it's based on figures that we get from the U.S. government that are then passed through down to state, and they set the rates and they're updated every year. It's important to note that on the affordable units, part of that also includes a utility allowance, so that actually lowers the rent even more. The market rate rents, that would be up to the developer to determine. I'll turn that back over to you, but generally those figures aren't even understood until right before opening.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay, we're looking for the next hand to be raised. Anybody else have some comments they'd like to share this evening?
Well, since Craig answered my first question, can I just follow up with, are those the same prices for the senior units as well? Or is it about, not sure, not to put you on the spot, of course, but thank you.
Well, the senior units and the family units, if they're governed by, if they're considered low income, but if they're income restricted, it's the same rent. The senior units that are not income restricted, they would be based, those are market rate.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to comment this evening on the potential effects of this project? They'd like the city to study in this draft EIR.
All right, Tony, well, I don't see any more raised hands. Is there maybe anyone who's using the phone in option that doesn't know how to raise their hand? It's a little bit different when you're on the phone. You can feel free to unmute if you have any comments. Again, we just want to make sure everyone has the opportunity to express their opinion and concerns and ask questions. As Tony mentioned, the comment period for the scoping portion of the EIR will end on end of business day, Tuesday, January 16th. However, the city has an ongoing interest in receiving folks' comments. So even though there's a hard deadline for the environmental analysis portion, if you think of something, past that date, please do feel free to reach out and contact the city. You can contact me or send in your comments. We will be keeping an update of this entire process under the city's website, our development spotlight page. And I'm sure you'll see other notices within the city manager's newsletter, which is released weekly. We thank you for being here this evening. And looking forward to hearing any further comments from you. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And again, you can look, I should mention that overall, the city expects this review process to take 9 to 10 months. So you can anticipate the draft EIR being released probably in spring for that 45-day review period and the final EIR in fall. So again, as Sherry said, please feel free to submit any comments you have. And again, the city will be working with us to prepare that draft EIR probably through spring of this year.
All right, well, thank you very
Great.
much for the good presentation. Thank you, Madison, for also being present. And thank you all for being here this evening. We will continue to have ongoing dialogue about this project. Hope you all have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Good night.